Mia was just 9 years old, but she had a heart as big as the world. Living in a modest apartment with her single mother, Angela, in a bustling city, Mia knew the value of compassion. They didn't have much, but Angela taught her that kindness didn't cost a thing. One crisp autumn afternoon, Mia and her mother went to the local park for their usual outing. While Angela settled on a bench with a book, Mia skipped ahead, clutching her favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich wrapped neatly in a napkin. She stopped in her tracks when she saw him, a man sitting on a worn-out blanket under a tree, his face weary and lined with hardship. The man, John, wore tattered clothes and had a faraway look in his blue eyes. He seemed lost, both physically and emotionally. Most people in the park hurried past him, pretending not to see. But Mia wasn't like most people. Without hesitation, she walked up to John, her innocent brown eyes filled with concern. "Are you hungry, mister?" she asked softly. John looked up, startled by her voice. He nodded slowly, his throat too dry to form words. Mia handed him her sandwich with a warm smile. "Here, you can have this. My mom says sharing is important." John accepted the sandwich, his hands trembling as he unwrapped it. He took a bite, tears welling up in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse but heartfelt. Mia stayed for a few moments, chatting with John before running back to her mother, who had watched the exchange with pride. That night, Mia went to bed feeling happy, unaware of the ripple her small act of kindness had set in motion. The next morning, a knock at the door startled Angela as she prepared breakfast. When she opened it, 2 police officers stood there, their expressions serious but kind. Behind them was John, cleaned up and standing tall. "Ma'am, is this your daughter?" one of the officers asked. Angela nodded, her heart racing. "Yes. Is something wrong?" The officer smiled. "No, quite the opposite. Your daughter might have helped solve a mystery that's been haunting a family for years." Angela stood frozen in the doorway, her hand clutching the edge of the doorframe as she tried to process what the officer had just said. Behind the uniformed men, John shifted nervously, his hands clasped together, but his eyes reflected gratitude. "Can we come in, ma'am?" "We'd like to explain," the second officer said gently. Angela nodded slowly, stepping aside to let them in. Mia, curious as ever, peeked out from behind the kitchen counter. Her eyes lit up when she saw John. "Mom, that's the man from the park," she exclaimed, running up to him. John knelt to her level, a small smile breaking across his weathered face. "Hello again, Mia. Thank you for the sandwich yesterday. You helped me more than you know." Angela, still wary, gestured for everyone to sit down in the small living room. "What's going on? Why are the police here?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. The first officer began to explain. "Yesterday, after your daughter shared her sandwich with this gentleman, a park ranger spotted them talking and recognized him. Turns out, Mr. John here has been missing for nearly 3 years. His family has been searching for him all this time." Angela's eyes widened in disbelief. She glanced at John, who nodded, looking both embarrassed and relieved. I didn't know who I was for a long time," John admitted. "I lost my memory after an accident. I ended up on the streets, surviving day to day. When Mia spoke to me, it felt like something clicked. Her kindness brought back a sense of humanity I hadn't felt in years." The second officer continued. "With the ranger's help, we were able to identify him and contact his family. They were overwhelmed with joy when we told them he'd been found. They want to meet you and your daughter to thank you personally." Mia's face lit up, but Angela hesitated. "Meet his family? Why us?" Mia just gave him a sandwich. "It was nothing special. It was special to me," John said, his voice firm. "That small act reminded me of who I used to be. I don't have the words to express my gratitude." Angela, still unsure, looked at Mia, who was beaming with excitement. "What do you think, sweetie?" she asked. Mia nodded eagerly. "I want to meet his family. Can we, Mom? Please?" Angela smiled faintly, unable to resist her daughter's enthusiasm. "All right," she agreed. The next day, Angela and Mia found themselves standing in front of a grand estate on the outskirts of the city. The house was enormous, with sprawling gardens and a driveway lined with luxury cars. Angela felt out of place in her simple dress, but Mia's excitement was contagious. A butler opened the door, leading them into a lavish sitting room where John's family waited. His mother, an elegant woman in her 60s, rushed forward the moment she saw him. "John, oh, my baby," she cried, enveloping him in a tearful embrace. John hugged her back, his own eyes glistening. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I never meant to disappear like that." Behind her stood a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to John. "You really had us worried, big brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Once the family reunion settled, John turned to Mia and Angela. "This is Mia and her mother, Angela," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "They're the reason I'm here today." John's mother approached Mia, kneeling to her level. "You're the little girl who helped my son?" she asked gently. Mia nodded shyly. "I just gave him my sandwich." He looked hungry. The older woman's eyes filled with tears as she smiled warmly. "You did so much more than that, dear. You reminded him that people care. You brought him back to us." Angela, feeling overwhelmed, stepped in. "Honestly, we didn't do anything special. Mia just did what she thought was right, but John's family wouldn't hear of it. His younger brother, Michael, said, 'What you did was extraordinary. Most people walk past without a second glance. You gave us our brother back, and we'll never forget that.'" As the afternoon went on, the family insisted on showing their gratitude. They learned about Angela's struggles as a single mother and the challenges she faced raising Mia. Inspired by their story, they made a surprising offer to sponsor Mia's education at a prestigious private school and provide Angela with the resources to start her own business. Angela was taken aback. "That's too much. We can't accept this." But John's mother insisted. "Please, let us do this. It's the least we can do to honor what your daughter did for our family." Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement at the thought of going to a new school, and Angela finally relented, realizing this was an opportunity that could change their lives. The weeks following that fateful day were a whirlwind of change for Angela and Mia. True to their word, John's family spared no effort in fulfilling their promises. Angela was enrolled in an entrepreneurial program at a renowned business institute, fully funded by the family, and given an initial grant to kickstart her dream of opening a small bakery. She had always loved baking, but years of juggling odd jobs had left her little time to pursue her passion. Now, with the financial and emotional support of John's family, she found herself in uncharted but thrilling territory. Meanwhile, Mia began attending one of the city's best private schools. On her first day, Angela was nervous as she helped Mia tie her hair into neat braids, ensuring her uniform was perfectly pressed. "Are you sure you're ready for this, sweetie?" Angela asked, her voice tinged with concern. Mia grinned confidently. "I'll be fine, Mom. Remember what you always say, kindness makes you brave." Angela hugged her tightly, whispering, "That's my girl." At school, Mia faced a new set of challenges. As one of the only black students in her class, she felt the weight of being different in an environment where most of her peers came from wealthy families. On her first day, as she entered the pristine classroom with its state-of-the-art technology and polished desks, she noticed the curious stares. "Who's the new girl?" one boy whispered to his friend. "She's on a scholarship," a girl murmured, her tone dismissive. Mia pretended not to hear, focusing instead on her teacher, Miss Turner, who greeted her warmly. "Welcome, Mia. We're so glad to have you here." Despite the chilly reception from some classmates, Mia's natural kindness and resilience began to shine through. During recess, she noticed a boy named Ethan sitting alone by the swings. He seemed shy and withdrawn, much like John had been when she first met him. Mia approached him with a smile. "Hi, I'm Mia. Do you want to play?" Ethan hesitated before nodding. As they played tag together, Mia's infectious energy drew the attention of other kids, who eventually joined in. By the end of the day, Ethan wasn't the only one who had warmed up to her. While Mia adjusted to her new school, John was rebuilding his life as well. With his family's help, He began receiving therapy to recover from his memory loss and the trauma of living on the streets. Slowly but surely, fragments of his past started to resurface. One evening, he invited Angela and Mia over for dinner at the estate. Angela, now more confident in her interactions with John's family, brought along a freshly baked apple pie, which John's mother raved about. During dinner, John shared more about his journey. Before the accident, I was working in finance, managing investments for my family's company. It was a high-pressure job, and I was constantly traveling. One night, on my way home from a late meeting, I was in a car accident. I don't remember much after that, except waking up in a hospital, disoriented and alone. He paused, his eyes clouded with emotion. I didn't even know my name. They told me I'd suffered a severe head injury and wandered off after being discharged. I ended up on the streets, surviving day to day. I was too ashamed to ask for help. Even when I started regaining bits and pieces of my memory, Angela and Mia listened intently, their hearts aching for him. "It's a miracle you found your way back," Angela said. John nodded, his gaze resting on Mia. "It's because of your daughter. Her kindness was a turning point for me. It gave me hope when I had none." As the weeks turned into months, Mia's friendship with John deepened. She often visited him after school, bringing drawings to decorate his room and chatting with him about her day. John, in turn, shared stories from his past, painting a vivid picture of the adventures he'd had before his accident. One afternoon, Mia asked him a question that had been on her mind. "Mr. John, why didn't anyone find you sooner? Didn't your family look for you?" John sighed, a mix of regret and sadness in his expression. "They did, but the accident happened far from home, and I didn't have any ID on me. By the time I made my way back to the city, I was unrecognizable. I'd changed so much physically and emotionally. I didn't think anyone would care enough to look for me anymore." Mia reached out and took his hand. "But they did care, and you found them again. That's what matters." Her simple words struck a chord, and John smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Angela's bakery, aptly named Mia's Kindness, opened to great success, becoming a beloved community hub. Customers loved the warm atmosphere, the delicious treats, and the story behind the name. Angela often told them, "It's all thanks to my daughter. Her small act of kindness changed our lives." Mia, now thriving in her new school, continued to inspire those around her. She started a school club dedicated to helping the less fortunate, rallying her classmates to collect donations for shelters and organize food drives. John, now fully reunited with his family and involved in their business again, became a mentor to Mia. He often reminded her, "Kindness is the most powerful gift we can give." "You proved that, Mia." As life seemed to settle into a comfortable rhythm for Angela, Mia, and John, an unexpected revelation disrupted the calm. It began one chilly winter evening, just a week before Christmas, when Angela received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this Angela Cooper?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is she," Angela replied cautiously. "This is Detective Harris with the city's missing persons unit. I've been working on John Thompson's case for years. I heard he was recently found. Is it possible for you to come down to the station? There's some information I think you and John should know." Angela felt her stomach twist. "What kind of information?" "It's best if I explain in person," the detective said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Can you bring John with you?" The following morning, Angela relayed the message to John. He looked surprised but agreed to accompany her to the station. Mia begged to come along, but Angela gently insisted that this was an adult matter. At the police station, Detective Harris greeted them with a folder in his hands. He gestured for them to sit in his small, cluttered office. "First, let me say I'm thrilled that you've been reunited with your family, Mr. Thompson," the detective began. "Your disappearance was a mystery that baffled many of us. But during our investigation, we uncovered something unusual." John leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Detective Harris opened the folder and placed a photograph on the desk. It was a blurry image of a man who looked remarkably like John, walking into what appeared to be a warehouse. "This photo was taken 2 months after your disappearance," Harris explained. "It was flagged in an unrelated investigation. At the time, we didn't know who this man was, but now I'm certain it was you." John's eyes widened as he stared at the photo. "That can't be right," he murmured. "I was on the streets. I don't remember ever being near a warehouse." Harris nodded. "That's where it gets strange. This warehouse was under surveillance because it was tied to a smuggling ring, human trafficking, to be specific." Angela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Are you saying John was involved in something like that?" "No, ma'am," Harris clarified quickly. "But we believe John may have been targeted. People with memory loss or who are otherwise vulnerable are often exploited in these situations. It's possible you were coerced or manipulated into doing something you don't even remember." "Mr. Thompson," John's face turned pale. I don't know what to say. This doesn't feel real," Harris continued. "We don't have enough evidence to make any accusations, but I wanted to make you aware. If you start to remember anything at all about that time, please let us know." The drive back from the station was silent. John stared out the window, lost in thought, while Angela's mind raced with questions. Could John have unknowingly been caught up in something dangerous during his lost years? Later that evening, Angela shared the news with Mia, keeping the darker details vague. "Mr. John might have been involved in something he doesn't remember," she explained gently. "But he's safe now, and that's what matters." Mia's brow furrowed with concern. "Will Mr. John be okay?" Angela smiled, trying to reassure her. "Of course, sweetie. He's strong, and he has us to support him." Over the next few days, the revelation began to weigh heavily on John. Memories he couldn't fully grasp flitted through his mind, dimly lit rooms, unfamiliar faces, a sense of fear. Determined to piece together the missing fragments, he decided to visit the warehouse from the photo. Angela insisted on accompanying him. "You shouldn't go alone," she said firmly. Together, they drove to the location, a run-down building on the outskirts of the city. The area was eerily quiet, with graffiti-covered walls and broken windows. As they approached the entrance, John hesitated. "This place feels familiar," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Take your time. We don't have to go in if you're not ready." John took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior was cold and empty, but as he wandered through the building, flashes of memory began to surface. A man in a dark suit giving orders, people crying quietly in a corner, the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. "I think I was here," John said, his voice trembling. "But I don't know why." Before they could delve further, a loud noise startled them. Angela and John turned to see a shadowy figure at the entrance, watching them. "Who's there?" Angela called out, her heart pounding. The figure stepped forward, a tall man with a scar across his cheek. He smirked as he looked at John. Well, looks like the lost sheep found his way back." John froze, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Who are you?" Angela demanded. The man ignored her, focusing on John. "We thought you were dead. Guess we were wrong." "You've got some explaining to do, Thompson." Angela instinctively grabbed John's arm. "We're leaving," the man laughed. "Go ahead, but don't think this is over. You're in deeper than you realize." As they rushed back to the car, Angela could feel John trembling beside her. Whatever they had just stumbled into, it was clear that John's past wasn't as buried as they thought. The car ride home from the warehouse was thick with tension. John sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window, his hands trembling. Angela gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing. Who was that man? And what had John gotten himself into during his missing years? When they arrived back at Angela's apartment, Mia greeted them eagerly at the door. "How was it? Did you remember anything, Mr. John?" she asked innocently. Angela knelt down, placing her hands gently on Mia's shoulders. "Sweetheart, Mr. John needs some time to figure things out. Let's give him some space, okay?" Mia nodded, sensing the seriousness of the situation. She hugged John tightly before retreating to her room. Once Mia was out of earshot, Angela turned to John. What do you remember about that man? He acted like he knew you. John rubbed his forehead, his voice shaky. I don't know exactly, but when I saw him, it was like a flood of memories trying to push through. I remember his face, his voice. He was in charge of something dangerous. I think he used me for whatever operation was going on in that warehouse. Angela sat down across from him, her eyes filled with concern. John, this is serious. If you were involved, even unknowingly, this man might come after you. Or worse, he might try to hurt me or me. John's expression darkened. I won't let that happen. I promise. I just need to figure out what I was involved in and why. Angela sighed, leaning back in her chair. Maybe you should tell your family about this. They have the resources to help, and you shouldn't face this alone. John shook his head. I don't want to bring this trouble to them. They've been through enough because of me. I need to handle this on my own. Angela wasn't convinced, but she knew pushing John too hard wouldn't help. All right, but if this man shows up again, we're going to the police immediately. No arguments. Over the next few days, John became increasingly withdrawn, spending hours researching human trafficking rings and local crime reports on Angela's old laptop. He also began jotting down fragmented memories in a notebook, hoping to piece together the puzzle. Meanwhile, Angela found herself growing more protective of Mia. Every knock at the door or unfamiliar face in the neighborhood made her heart race. She even started walking Mia to and from school, something she hadn't done in years. Mia noticed the change in her mother's behavior. One afternoon, as they walked home, she asked, "Mom, is something wrong?" "You seem worried." Angela forced a smile. "I'm just being careful, sweetie. It's nothing for you to worry about." But Mia wasn't convinced. Later that evening, she found John in the living room, staring intently at his notebook. "Mr. John," she said softly, "are you okay? You look sad." John looked up, startled. He forced a smile. "I'm all right, Mia. Just thinking about some old memories." Mia tilted her head. "Does it help to talk about them? When I have bad dreams, talking to Mom always makes me feel better." Her innocent suggestion struck a chord with John. "You're right, Mia," he said, closing the notebook. "Sometimes it does help to talk. Thank you." Later that night, John decided to confide in Angela about the fragments of memories he'd uncovered. "I remember being taken to the warehouse shortly after my accident," he began. "I was disoriented, confused. There were other people there. Some of them were just like me, people who looked lost, broken. I think the man from the warehouse was running some kind of operation, using vulnerable people like me as pawns." Angela listened intently, her heart sinking. "Do you think they're still operating?" John nodded grimly. "If that man is still hanging around, it's likely. And if he recognized me, it means they think I know something that could expose them." Angela's mind raced. "We need to tell the police. Detective Harris already suspects something. Maybe he can help." John hesitated. "I'm scared, Angela. If they find out I'm talking to the police, they could retaliate." Angela reached out, placing a hand on his. "You're not alone in this, John. We'll figure it out together. But staying silent won't protect you or anyone else they might be hurting." The next morning, Angela called Detective Harris and arranged a meeting. When they arrived at the station, John hesitated outside the door. "What if this makes things worse?" he asked nervously. Angela gave him a reassuring look. "Trust me, John. This is the right thing to do." Inside, Harris listened as John recounted his fragmented memories, carefully taking notes. When John finished, the detective leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "This confirms some of the suspicions we've had about that warehouse," Harris said. "It's been on our radar for years, but we've never had enough evidence to make arrests. Your testimony could be a game changer." John's stomach churned at the thought. "You think they'll come after me?" Harris nodded. "It's possible, but we can offer protection. And if we take this to court, your testimony could help shut them down for good." Angela placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You can do this," she said firmly. For the first time in days, John felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn his pain into something meaningful, something that could save others. The decision to cooperate with Detective Harris marked a turning point for John, but it also brought new complications. As he prepared to provide testimony, Angela and Mia found themselves drawn deeper into his past, and the shadows of the dangerous operation began looming larger over their lives. A few days after their meeting at the police station, Angela noticed a black car parked across the street from her apartment. It wasn't unusual for cars to come and go in the busy neighborhood, but this one stood out. It never seemed to move, and whenever she glanced out the window, the same figure sat behind the wheel, watching. Angela tried to brush it off, thinking she was being paranoid, but her instincts wouldn't let her rest. That evening, as she cleaned up after dinner, she casually mentioned it to John. "There's been a car parked outside for a while now," she said, keeping her tone light. "Have you noticed it?" John froze, his fore covering midair. "What kind of car?" "Black, four-door, tinted windows." "Why?" His expression darkened. "I saw a car like that when I was walking back from the store yesterday. It felt like someone was following me, but I thought I was imagining things." Angela's stomach twisted. "Do you think it's them, the people from the warehouse?" John nodded slowly. "It's possible. If they know I'm talking to the police, they might be trying to scare me or worse." The following evening, while Angela was helping Mia with her homework, there was a loud crash outside. Angela rushed to the window and gasped. Her car, parked just below the apartment, had a shattered windshield. A large brick lay on the hood, surrounded by shards of glass. A wave of panic washed over her as she scanned the street, but whoever had done it was long gone. She called John, who was in his room, and he ran to her side, his expression tense. "This isn't random," he said, his voice low. "They're trying to send a message." Angela called the police, but when the officers arrived, they couldn't find any evidence pointing to the culprit. "We'll file a report and increase patrols in the area," one officer assured her. "But if you feel unsafe, consider staying somewhere else for a while." That night, Angela couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. For Mia's sake, she couldn't let fear control her, but she also couldn't ignore the very real danger that now surrounded them. Meanwhile, Mia was beginning to notice the tension between her mother and John. She overheard their whispered conversations and saw the worry in their eyes. Wanting to help, she decided to investigate on her own. One afternoon after school, Mia asked her best friend, Ethan, to borrow his tablet during recess. She searched for news articles about warehouses and missing people, trying to piece together what might be troubling John. What she found shocked her. An old article detailed a police raid on a nearby warehouse suspected of human trafficking, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence. The article mentioned a key suspect who had fled before the raid, a man described as tall, with a scar on his cheek. Mia's heart raced as she remembered John and Angela mentioning someone fitting that description. She didn't know what it all meant, but she felt an urgency to tell her mom. As Angela tried to focus on her new bakery, she soon found that the threats weren't confined to her home. One morning, she arrived at the shop to find graffiti scrawled across the front window, "Keep quiet or else." Her hands trembled as she unlocked the door and stepped inside, half expecting more damage. To her relief, the interior was untouched, but the message was clear. She called John immediately, her voice shaking. "They've targeted the bakery now. What if they go after Mia next?" John's guilt was palpable over the phone. "This is my fault," he said. "I never should have let you get involved." "Stop blaming yourself," Angela snapped, though her tone softened almost immediately. "We're in this together now, but we need to act fast." That evening, John paced the apartment while Angela sat on the couch, nervously tapping her foot. "I can't let them keep threatening you and Mia," he said finally. "I need to confront that man, the one from the warehouse. If I can get him to back off, maybe this will end." Angela shot to her feet. "Absolutely not. That's exactly what they want, for you to face them alone." "And what if something happens to you?" John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what else to do. The police are moving too slowly, and every day we wait, you and Mia are in more danger." Angela grabbed his arm, her voice firm. "We're not doing this your way, John. We go to the police again. We tell them everything about the threats, the car, the vandalism. Let them protect us. John hesitated, torn between his guilt and the logic of Angela's words. Finally, he nodded. All right, we'll go tomorrow. The next morning, as they prepared to visit the station, Detective Harris called with unexpected news. We've been tracking a suspicious individual who matches the description you gave us, he said. He's staying in a motel on the edge of town. We're planning a sting operation, but I need your cooperation. Angela's heart sank. What kind of cooperation? I need John to help us identify him in person, Harris said. We'll ensure his safety, but his testimony will be critical. Angela glanced at John, who had been listening. He gave a determined nod. I'll do it, he said. As they prepared for the operation, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something much bigger and much more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. John's decision to cooperate with the police set the stage for a high-stakes confrontation, but it also brought a storm of emotions for everyone involved. The days leading up to the sting operation were fraught with tension, leaving Angela, John, and even young Mia grappling with fear, uncertainty, and the bonds they had formed through their shared struggles. Despite Angela's efforts to shield her, Mia sensed the growing danger surrounding John. At school, she found herself distracted, unable to focus on her lessons. During recess, she sat alone under a tree, clutching the small charm bracelet John had given her as a thank-you gift weeks earlier. Her best friend, Ethan, noticed her unusual quietness and sat down beside her. What's wrong, Mia? You've been acting weird. Mia hesitated, unsure if she should confide in him. But the weight of her worries was too much to carry alone. It's about Mr. John, she said finally. He's helping the police with something dangerous, and I'm scared something bad might happen to him. Ethan frowned, his youthful confidence bubbling to the surface. The police are supposed to protect people, right? They'll make sure he's okay. Mia nodded, but her heart wasn't convinced. I hope you're right. That evening, after dinner, Mia approached John as he sat at the kitchen table, staring at his notebook. Mr. John, do you have to help the police? Can't they do it without you? John looked up, startled by the question. Mia, I know it's scary, but this is something I need to do. If I can help stop those bad people, I have to try. It's the right thing to do. Mia's lip quivered as she whispered, what if they hurt you? What if you don't come back? John's heart broke at the sight of her fear. He knelt down and took her hands in his. Hey, I promise you, I'll do everything I can to stay safe. And no matter what, I'll always be grateful for you, Mia. You're the bravest little girl I know. Mia hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapped around his neck. Please be careful, Mr. John. Meanwhile, Angela struggled with her own fears. She couldn't stop replaying the threats in her mind, the black car, the vandalized bakery, the man's chilling words at the warehouse. She knew involving the police was the right decision, but the risk to John and by extension, her family felt unbearable. The night before the operation, Angela couldn't sleep. She found John sitting in the living room, staring at the flickering light of the television. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, sitting beside him. John shook his head. Too much on my mind. Every time I think I've put my past behind me, it finds a way to pull me back. Angela sighed, her voice soft. You don't have to do this alone, you know. We're in this together now. John turned to her, his blue eyes filled with gratitude. You've done so much for me, Angela. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you. You don't owe me anything, John, she said firmly. But if something happens to you, her voice broke, and she quickly wiped away a tear. I don't know how I'd explain it to Mia. She looks up to you so much. John reached out, taking her hand. I'll do everything I can to come back in one piece. I promise. The day of the operation dawned cold and gray. Angela drove John to the police station, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. Mia begged to come along, but Angela insisted she stay with a neighbor. Detective Harris greeted them at the station, his demeanor calm but focused. We've got everything in place, he assured John. You'll be safe. All we need you to do is confirm the man's identity when we bring him out. After that, you're free to leave. Angela pulled Harris aside before they left. "If anything happens to him," she began, her voice shaking. "Nothing will," Harris said confidently. "We'll have officers everywhere. He won't even be close to the suspect." But as Angela watched them drive off to the motel, her stomach churned with dread. At the motel, John sat in an unmarked car with Harris and another officer, his nerves frayed. Through binoculars, he spotted the man with the scar entering one of the rooms. "That's him," John said, his voice shaking. Harris nodded. "All right, stay here. We'll take it from here." The officers moved in, surrounding the room. John watched as they knocked on the door and shouted for the man to come out. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the door burst open, and the scarred man tried to make a run for it. The police tackled him quickly, but as they restrained him, he shouted something that sent a chill down John's spine. "You think this ends with me? You have no idea what you've stepped into, Thompson." John's breath caught as the man turned his head, locking eyes with him through the car window. A smirk spread across the scarred man's face, and he mouthed 3 words, "I'll find you." John returned to Angela's apartment shaken but unharmed. Mia ran to hug him the moment he walked through the door. "You're okay?" she cried, her relief evident. Angela, however, noticed the haunted look in John's eyes. "What happened?" she asked once Mia had gone to bed. John recounted the man's words, his voice trembling. "I thought this would end things, but I think it's just the beginning." Angela's face hardened. "Then we'll prepare. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together." The sting operation had successfully apprehended the man with the scar, but his chilling threat lingered in the minds of John and Angela. Instead of bringing relief, his capture only seemed to escalate the danger surrounding them. The day after the arrest, Detective Harris called Angela and John to the station. "We've got the suspect in custody," he explained, "but he's refusing to talk. He's denying everything and demanding a lawyer." "What about his operation?" John asked. "Doesn't his arrest shut it down?" Harris shook his head, frustration etched on his face. "The man we arrested is just one piece of a larger network. He's a lieutenant, not the boss. And until we can get him to cooperate or gather more evidence, his arrest doesn't stop anything." Angela felt a chill run down her spine. "So, we're still in danger?" Harris hesitated before answering. "There's a chance his associates might try to retaliate. We're monitoring the situation closely, but I'd advise you both to stay vigilant." Angela was closing up the bakery. She found a note tucked into the handle of the door. Her heart pounded as she unfolded the small piece of paper. The message was brief but chilling. "You can't hide forever." Angela rushed home, clutching the note tightly in her trembling hand. "John, we need to talk," she said the moment she walked through the door. John, who had been reading through his notebook, looked up, alarmed. "What happened?" She handed him the note. His face hardened as he read it, and he immediately called Detective Harris. The detective arrived within the hour, taking the note into evidence. "This confirms what we suspected," Harris said grimly. "They're trying to intimidate you. But leaving a note like this is risky. It means they're watching you closely." Angela shivered. "How do we stop this?" "For now, we'll increase patrols around your home and bakery. And I'll make sure you have my direct number in case anything else happens," Harris assured her. But his words did little to ease her fear. Determined to protect Angela and Mia, John threw himself into researching the warehouse and its connections. Late one night, he stumbled across an old article about a series of unexplained disappearances in the city from years ago. One of the names caught his attention, Marcus Grayson. "That name sounds familiar," John muttered to himself. He flipped through his notebook, scanning his fragmented memories. Suddenly, it clicked. Marcus Grayson was one of the men he had seen at the warehouse. He remembered hearing the name during a heated argument between the scarred man and someone on a phone call. The next morning, John shared his discovery with Angela. "Marcus Grayson might be the key to this whole thing," he said. "If we can find him, we might be able to figure out who's behind this network." Angela nodded. "We should tell Harris. He might be able to track this guy down." Unbeknownst to Angela and John, Mia had overheard their conversation about Marcus Grayson. Feeling brave, she decided to look him up online during her lunch break at school. Her search led her to a recent news article about a high-profile real estate developer with the same name. Marcus Grayson was described as a wealthy businessman with powerful connections, but the article also mentioned rumors of shady dealings in his past. Mia printed the article and slipped it into her backpack, determined to show it to her mom later. That evening, as Mia sat at the kitchen table with the article, Angela noticed her deep concentration. "What's that, sweetie?" she asked. Mia hesitated, then slid the article across the table. "I heard you and Mr. John talking about Marcus Grayson. Is this him?" Angela's heart sank as she read the article. "Mia, where did you get this?" "I looked it up at school," Mia admitted. "I thought it might help." Angela's voice softened, though her worry was evident. "Sweetheart, I appreciate you trying to help, but this is very dangerous. You have to let the adults handle it, okay?" Mia nodded reluctantly. "Okay, Mom." The discovery of Marcus Grayson seemed like a breakthrough, but it also brought more danger. That night, as John walked to the corner store to grab milk, he noticed the black car following him again. This time, instead of ignoring it, he ducked into an alley and watched as the car pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, holding an envelope. He glanced around before dropping the envelope near a trash can and driving off. John waited until the car disappeared, then cautiously approached the envelope. Inside was a single photograph of Angela, Mia, and himself walking together near the bakery. Scrawled across the bottom in bold letters were the words, "Stay out of this, or else." John returned to the apartment, his hands shaking as he handed the photograph to Angela. Her face turned pale as she stared at the image. "They're watching us," she whispered. "This has gone too far," John said. "We can't keep living like this. We have to do something." Angela nodded, determination replacing her fear. "Then we find Marcus Grayson. If he's involved, we'll make sure the police take him down." For the first time, Angela and John felt united in their resolve. The threat was no longer just a shadow in the background, it was staring them in the face. As the danger escalated, so did their determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The tension in Angela's small apartment was palpable. With the photograph serving as a stark reminder of the danger surrounding them, Angela, John, and even young Mia found themselves entangled in a web that stretched far beyond their understanding. As they dug deeper, unlikely allies and startling connections began to emerge, complicating the situation, but also providing glimmers of hope. The morning after John discovered the threatening photograph, Angela and John met with Detective Harris at the station. Angela slid the photograph across the table. "This was left for us last night," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Harris studied the photo, his jaw tightening. "This is a clear escalation," he said, his tone serious. "They're trying to scare you into silence, or worse." John interjected. "They're not just scaring us. They're making it clear they can get to us anytime." Harris leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's something I need to tell you. Marcus Grayson has been a person of interest in several investigations over the years: drug trafficking, illegal arms deals, and even connections to organized crime. We've never been able to pin anything on him, but your testimony might change that." Angela frowned. "Why hasn't he been arrested if you suspect him of all that?" "He's slippery," Harris admitted. "His wealth and influence make it easy for him to cover his tracks. But if you're willing to take the risk, we might have a way to bring him in." John tensed. "What risk?" Harris hesitated. "Grayson operates in the shadows. We'd need more than just your testimony. Someone would have to get close enough to uncover hard evidence, records, financial documents, something tangible." Angela shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. You can't ask that of John or anyone else." But John's mind was already racing. "If it means ending this, I'll do it," he said, determination flashing in his eyes. As they left the station, Angela tried to convince John to reconsider. "You're not a cop, John. This isn't your responsibility," she argued. "It became my responsibility the moment they targeted you and Mia." John shot back. "I can't just sit around while they keep threatening us." Angela sighed, knowing his mind was made up. "If you're going to do this, at least let me help." she said reluctantly. Later that evening, a surprising visitor knocked on their door. Michael, John's younger brother. Angela hadn't seen him since the day she and Mia met John's family, and his sudden appearance was unexpected. "Michael, what are you doing here?" John asked, surprised. Michael stepped inside, his expression serious. "Mom told me what's been going on. I did some digging of my own, and I think I can help." Angela raised an eyebrow. "How?" Michael hesitated before answering. "I have connections in the tech world, friends who are good at finding things most people can't. If Grayson has digital footprints, we can track them." John looked skeptical. "Why would you risk getting involved in this?" Michael met his brother's gaze. "Because you're my family. And because if this man is as dangerous as you say, someone has to stop him." Over the next few days, Michael worked tirelessly alongside John and Angela. Using his tech-savvy skills, he hacked into public records, financial databases, and even some less-than-legal systems. "Grayson's real estate company is a front," Michael explained one night, pointing at his laptop screen. "He's laundering money through fake property transactions. Look here, this warehouse is listed as a logistics hub, but there's no record of any shipments or employees. It's just a shell." Angela leaned over his shoulder, her brow furrowed. "That's the warehouse where John was taken." Michael nodded. "Exactly. If we can connect him to the illegal activities there, it could blow his whole operation wide open." While the adults worked late into the night, Mia began to notice how much time they were spending together. She felt left out, but also curious about what they were uncovering. One evening, she wandered into the living room, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "What are you all looking at?" she asked sleepily. Angela quickly moved to block the screen. "Nothing for you to worry about, sweetie. You should be in bed." But Mia caught a glimpse of the name, Marcus Grayson, and froze. "I've seen that name before." Everyone turned to her, startled. "What do you mean?" John asked. Mia ran to her backpack and pulled out a crumpled flyer from her school. "This, he donated a bunch of money to our new gym. They had an assembly about it last month." Angela snatched the flyer, her eyes widening as she read it. "He's funding the school?" Michael frowned. "That's not unusual for someone like him. It's a way to build goodwill and keep up appearances." John's jaw tightened. "Or to launder money. If he's using the school as a front, there could be records there, receipts, invoices, something we can use." The group quickly realized that accessing the school's financial records could provide the evidence they needed to expose Grayson. But breaking into a school, even for a noble cause, was a risky move. Michael suggested a plan. "We don't need to break in. We just need access to the school's network. If we can get someone inside, someone who has a legitimate reason to use the computers, we can pull the files remotely." Everyone's eyes turned to Mia. Angela immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not. She's just a child." But Mia spoke up, her voice steady. "I can do it, Mom. I use the computer lab all the time for homework. No one will think it's weird if I'm there after school." Angela looked horrified. "Mia, this isn't a game. If anyone catches you, they won't." Mia interrupted, her eyes shining with determination. "You always say we have to help people when we can. This is my way of helping." John placed a reassuring hand on Angela's shoulder. "She's brave, just like her mom. But this has to be her decision." Angela stared at her daughter, torn between fear and pride. Finally, she sighed. "All right, but you're only going to do exactly what Michael tells you. No taking risks." Mia nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mom." As the pieces of their plan fell into place, the stakes grew higher. With Grayson's network closing in and the risk of exposure greater than ever, Angela, John, and Mia prepared to make their boldest move yet. The plan to uncover evidence against Marcus Grayson moved forward with growing urgency. The threats against Angela and her family had intensified, and John knew that this was their best chance to expose Grayson's operation before it was too late. But as the group prepared for the next step, the weight of their decisions began to bear down on them, and unforeseen complications pushed them to their limits. Mia sat at the breakfast table, stirring her cereal absently. Today was the day she would execute her part of the plan. Despite her brave words the night before, her stomach churned with nerves. Angela noticed her unease and knelt down beside her. "Sweetie, are you sure you want to do this? It's okay to back out if you're scared." Mia looked up at her mother, determination flickering in her eyes. "I can do it, Mom. I promise I'll be careful." Angela's heart swelled with pride and fear. She kissed Mia's forehead. "All right, just remember, you're not alone. Mr. Michael will be watching everything from here, and if anything feels wrong, you stop immediately, okay?" Mia nodded. At school, Mia waited for the right moment to put the plan into action. After her last class of the day, she headed to the computer lab with her backpack slung over one shoulder. Michael had given her a small USB drive containing the program he designed to extract the school's financial records. All she had to do was plug it in and follow his instructions. The lab was empty when she arrived, just as Michael had predicted. Mia sat down at a terminal, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled out the USB drive. "Okay, just like Mr. Michael said," she whispered to herself. She inserted the drive and launched the program. A small window popped up, asking for a password. Mia quickly typed in the code Michael had provided, and the program began running, pulling files and encrypting them for secure transfer. But just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, the door to the lab opened. "Mia, what are you doing here?" Mia's heart leapt into her throat as she turned to see her teacher, Miss Turner, standing in the doorway. I'm working on my history project," Mia said quickly, her voice wavering. Miss Turner raised an eyebrow, but didn't question her further. "All right, just don't stay too late. The janitor locks this room at p.m." Mia nodded, forcing a smile as Miss Turner left. Once the door closed, she turned back to the computer and saw that the program was nearly finished. "Come on, hurry up," she muttered under her breath. Finally, the program completed its task, and the screen displayed a confirmation message. "Transfer complete. Safe to remove drive." Mia pulled out the USB drive and quickly packed up her things, her heart still racing from the close call. That evening, Michael worked late into the night, analyzing the data Mia had retrieved. Angela sat beside him, anxiously sipping a cup of tea. "Did we get anything useful?" she asked. Michael didn't answer right away, his eyes scanning lines of financial records and transactions. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "This is it," he said. "Grayson's been funneling millions of dollars through the school's accounts into offshore bank accounts. And look at this, there are payments to shell companies tied directly to the warehouse John identified." "This is the proof we need," Angela exhaled sharply. "So what happens now?" Michael's face grew serious. "We take this to Harris. With this level of evidence, they can issue warrants for Grayson and his associates. But we have to move fast. If Grayson realizes we've found this, he'll disappear." As they prepared to leave for the police station, the apartment's windows suddenly shattered, and a loud bang echoed through the room. Smoke filled the air as Angela screamed, grabbing Mia and pulling her to the floor. John rushed to the front door, peeking through the peephole to see two men in black masks approaching. "They're here," he shouted. Michael quickly shut his laptop, grabbed the USB drive, and stuffed it into his pocket. "We have to get out of here now." John helped Angela and Mia to their feet, guiding them toward the back door. "Go. I'll hold them off." "No, John," Angela cried, but he shook his head firmly. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. "Go." Reluctantly, Angela and Michael led Mia out the back door and into the alley. Angela looked back one last time, her heart pounding as she heard the sound of a struggle inside the apartment. The group fled to a nearby diner, where Michael quickly contacted Detective Harris. "We've been attacked," he said urgently. "We have the evidence, but Grayson's men are onto us. We need protection." Harris arrived within minutes with a team of officers, escorting Angela, Mia, and Michael to a safe house. John, bruised but alive, joined them shortly after, escorted by another officer. "Are you okay?" Angela asked, tears streaming down her face as she embraced him. "I'm fine," John said, though his voice was strained. "They didn't get what they were after, In the safety of the secure location, Detective Harris reviewed the evidence Michael had uncovered. "This is more than enough to build a case," he said. "We'll move on Grayson and his operation first thing in the morning." Angela, still shaken, looked at Harris. "Will this finally end it?" Harris nodded. "If everything goes as planned, yes." But as the group settled in for the night, none of them could shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The safe house provided a semblance of security, but Angela, John, and Mia knew that the danger wasn't over. Marcus Grayson's reach extended far beyond their understanding, and they couldn't shake the feeling that he was still one step ahead. The next morning, as Detective Harris and his team prepared to execute raids on Grayson's properties, an unexpected twist forced Angela and John to make life-altering decisions. Michael was working with Harris to finalize the case files when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. "What's wrong?" Angela asked, noticing the sudden change in his expression. Michael hesitated before turning the screen toward her. It was a message with a photo attached. Mia walking to school, clutching her backpack. The message read, "You have until noon to destroy the evidence. If you don't, she pays the price." Angela's heart stopped as she snatched the phone from his hand. "How do they know where Mia is?" she demanded. John rushed to Mia, who was sitting on the couch, obliviously coloring in her sketchbook. "Mia, sweetie, do you remember seeing anyone watching you recently?" Mia shook her head. "No, Mr. John." "Why?" Angela knelt in front of her, trying to stay calm. "It's okay, baby. We're just being extra careful right now." Michael turned to Harris, his face pale. "They have eyes on her, even with the security you've provided." "How is that possible?" Harris clenched his jaw. "Grayson must have people inside law enforcement. That's the only way they'd know your location." John's fist tightened. "So what do we do?" "They're threatening a child, Harris." The detective's face was grim. "We don't negotiate with criminals. But this changes things. We need to move now. Hit Grayson's operation before they have a chance to strike again." As Harris coordinated with his team, Angela pulled John aside. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "It's about Mia. I can't risk her life for this." "I can't." John placed his hands on her shoulders, his expression filled with equal parts guilt and determination. "Angela, if we back down now, they'll never stop. They'll come after you, after Mia, until we're all too scared to fight back. We have to see this through." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "And if something happens to her, or to you," John hesitated, then whispered, "if we don't stop them, something will happen to all of us. This is our chance to end it for good." Angela searched his eyes for reassurance, but all she saw was the heavy burden of the decision they both had to make. Finally, she nodded, though her heart ached with fear. By mid-morning, Harris and his team moved on Grayson's properties. Armed with the financial records Michael had uncovered and John's testimony, they targeted several key locations, including the warehouse and Grayson's luxurious penthouse. Angela, Mia, John, and Michael remained at the safe house under heavy guard. The minutes dragged on like hours as they waited for updates. Suddenly, Harris's voice crackled through a secure line. "We've hit a snag at the penthouse. Grayson's not here." Angela's chest tightened. "What do you mean he's not there? Isn't that his main base?" "He must have been tipped off," Harris replied. "We're sweeping his other properties now, but he's gone to ground." Just as the group began to process the bad news, Michael's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video call from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Grayson's face filled the screen, his expression calm but menacing. "Hello, Michael. I see your little group has been busy." Angela leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Where is he? What do you want from us?" Grayson smirked. "What I want is simple. Stay out of my business. Destroy whatever evidence you've gathered, and I'll let the girl go." Angela's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, the girl?" Grayson turned the camera to reveal a live feed of Mia, sitting in a dimly lit room. She looked unharmed but frightened, her eyes darting around as she clutched her stuffed animal. "Mia!" Angela screamed, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter. Grayson's voice remained calm. "She's fine for now. But if you don't do as I say, that could change. John stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. If you hurt her, I swear. Grayson cut him off. You're in no position to make threats, Thompson. You have 2 hours to decide. If I don't hear from you, you'll never see her again. The screen went dark, leaving the room in stunned silence. Hare, sobbing uncontrollably. He has her, John. My baby, he has her. John knelt beside her, gripping her hands tightly. We're going to get her back, Angela. I swear. Michael paced the room, his mind racing. He's bluffing. Grayson knows he's losing. He wouldn't harm her. It would only make things worse for him. I'm not willing to take that chance. Angela snapped. John stood, his jaw set with determination. If Grayson wants to deal, I'll deal. I'll go to him. No, Angela cried, grabbing his arm. That's exactly what he wants. It's the only way to keep Mia safe, John said firmly. But we won't go unprepared. Michael, can you trace the call? Michael nodded. It'll take time, but yes. Good, John said. Get us his location. We'll give him what he wants on our terms. As Michael began tracing the call, the clock ticked relentlessly toward Grayson's deadline. Angela and John braced themselves for the ultimate confrontation, knowing that the decisions they made in the next 2 hours would determine not only Mia's fate, but their own. The minutes ticked away with agonizing slowness as Michael worked to trace the call. Angela paced the safe house, her hands trembling as she clutched the charm bracelet Mia had left behind. John sat silently at the table, staring at the clock, his mind replaying Grayson's threat. Every second brought them closer to the moment they'd either save Mia or lose her forever. Michael's fingers flew across the keyboard as the tracer program pinged one last time. A location appeared on the screen. I've got him, Michael exclaimed, turning the laptop to face the others. The call came from an abandoned dockyard on the east side of the city. Detective Harris, who had been standing by, grabbed his radio. This is Harris. We've got a location, abandoned docks at Pier 17. Assemble the team and head there immediately. Angela's heart pounded. Please, just get her out safely. Harris nodded firmly. We will. Stay here, and I'll update you as soon as we have her. But John stood up, shaking his head. No, I'm going with you. Absolutely not, Harris said. It's too dangerous. Let my team handle this. She's in danger because of me, John countered. I'm not sitting here while you take all the risks. I know how Grayson operates, and I might be able to get through to him. Angela stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Please bring her back, she whispered. John nodded, his voice steady. I will. The convoy of police cars approached the desolate dockyard, their lights off to avoid detection. The air was heavy with mist, and the faint sound of water lapping against the docks added to the eerie atmosphere. Harris handed John a bulletproof vest. You stay close to me. No heroics. John nodded, but his mind was racing. As the team moved in, they spotted a dimly lit building at the far end of the pier. Harris signaled for the officers to surround it. He's in there, he whispered. Inside, Mia sat tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. Grayson paced the room, a cold smirk on his face as he toyed with a silver lighter. Any minute now, he muttered. A sharp knock at the door made Mia jump. Grayson signaled to one of his men, who opened the door cautiously. Harris and John stepped inside, their hands raised. Grayson, Harris said calmly, it's over. We've got your operation, your accounts, everything. Grayson chuckled, shaking his head. You're wasting your breath, detective. If I'm going down, I'm taking them with me. He pulled a gun from his waistband and pointed it at Mia. One more step, and she's gone. Wait, John shouted, stepping forward. Grayson turned the gun toward him. Aw, Thompson, you just couldn't stay out of it, could you? John raised his hands, his voice steady. This isn't about the police. It's about me. You don't need her, take me instead. Grayson tilted his head, intrigued. You're willing to trade your life for hers? Yes, John said firmly. Let her go, and I'll stay. Angela's voice crackled over Harris's earpiece from the safe house. What is he doing? Stop him. But Harris whispered back, we have to trust him. He's buying us time. Grayson stared at John for a long moment, then nodded to his men. Cut the girl loose. One of the goons untied Mia, who immediately ran toward John. He knelt down, hugging her tightly. It's okay, Mia. You're going home now. Mr. John, don't stay, she cried, clutching his neck. John gently pulled her away. Go with the detective. I'll be fine. As Harris led Mia toward the door, Grayson raised his gun again. Not so fast, he said, his voice cold. John stepped in front of Harris and Mia. You've got me. That was the deal, Grayson sneered. Deals mean nothing to me, Thompson. You should know that. Suddenly, a shot rang out. The room erupted into chaos as Harris's team burst in, guns drawn. Grayson's men returned fire, but the police quickly overpowered them. Grayson grabbed John, using him as a shield. Nobody move, or he dies. John struggled against Grayson's grip, his voice hoarse. Harris, take the shot. I can't, Harris shouted, his gun trained on Grayson, but unable to get a clear line of fire. At that moment, Angela's voice echoed in John's mind. You're not alone in this. Summoning every ounce of strength, John drove his elbow into Grayson's ribs, causing him to stumble. The momentary distraction was enough. Harris fired, hitting Grayson in the shoulder. The crime lord fell to the ground, clutching his wound as officers swarmed him. Mia ran to John as soon as the gunfire stopped, tears streaming down her face. Mr. John, you're okay? John hugged her tightly, relief washing over him. I told you I'd come back. Angela arrived moments later, rushing into the building and enveloping Mia in her arms. She turned to John, her voice breaking. You saved her. John smiled weakly. We all did. As Grayson was hauled away in handcuffs, Harris approached the group. He's done. With the evidence you provided and what we've found here, he's going away for a long time. Angela looked at Harris, gratitude shining in her tear-filled eyes. Thank you for everything, Harris nodded. It was a team effort. And John, he extended a hand. You were brave today. We couldn't have done this without you. John shook his hand, but his eyes were on Angela and Mia. I didn't do it for me. I did it for them. As the dockyard emptied and the chaos faded into the night, one thing was clear. Their lives had been forever changed. Grayson's reign of terror was over, and the bonds forged through their struggle were stronger than ever. The days following the rescue at the dockyard brought a sense of relief, though the scars of the ordeal remained. Marcus Grayson and his associates were officially charged with a litany of crimes, ranging from human trafficking to money laundering. The overwhelming evidence, including the files retrieved by Michael and John's testimony, left little room for doubt. As the legal system began dismantling Grayson's network, Angela, Mia, and John began piecing their lives back together, forever changed by the experience. Sitting in her bakery one sunny afternoon, Angela reflected on the tumultuous weeks that had just passed. The bakery's windows had been repaired, but the memory of the threatening graffiti lingered. However, Angela chose to view it as a symbol of resilience rather than fear. Business had picked up again, and loyal customers stopped by not only for her famous pastries, but also to check in on her well-being. Mia, too, had returned to her routine, though she was no longer the same little girl who had innocently offered her sandwich to a stranger. She had seen the harsh realities of the world, but also learned the profound power of kindness and bravery. One afternoon, she approached Angela while doing her homework at the bakery. Mom, she asked, do you think Mr. John is okay? He seemed sad last time I saw him. Angela paused, wiping her hands on her apron. I think he's healing, sweetie. What we went through was hard on all of us, but he's stronger than he realizes. Mia smiled thoughtfully. Maybe we should visit him and remind him he's part of our family now. Angela hugged her daughter tightly. I think that's a wonderful idea. Meanwhile, John had moved back into his family's home, though the reunion was bittersweet. While his mother and brother welcomed him with open arms, John struggled with guilt over his past and the role he had unknowingly played in Grayson's operation. Therapy sessions helped him process his trauma and forgive himself, but he still felt a need to do more. One day, Michael visited John in his study. You know, you could use your experience to help others, Michael suggested. John looked up, intrigued. What do you mean? There are plenty of organizations that support victims of trafficking and exploitation, Michael explained. With your story, you could raise awareness, help bring more people to justice. John thought about it, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of purpose. A week later, Angela and Mia visited John at his family's estate. They found him in the garden, tending to a row of blooming flowers. He looked up and smiled as Mia ran to him. "Mr. John, we missed you," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his waist. "I missed you too, Mia," John said, kneeling to her level. "How's school?" "It's good," she said, beaming. "And Mom's bakery is super busy now." Angela approached, carrying a small box. "We wanted to thank you for everything, John. You didn't just save Mia, you've become a part of our lives." She handed him the box. Inside was a silver watch engraved with the words, "Kindness is courage." John stared at it, overcome with emotion. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Say you'll wear it," Angela said with a smile. "It's a reminder that no matter what you've been through, you've always been a good man." John nodded, slipping the watch onto his wrist. "Thank you. This means more to me than you know." As months turned into years, the bonds between Angela, Mia, and John only deepened. John began working with a non-profit dedicated to supporting survivors of trafficking, using his experiences to inspire others. His story, once a source of shame, became a powerful tool for change. Angela's bakery flourished, and she often shared her story with customers, reminding them of how a simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that changed their lives. Mia grew into a confident young woman, her early experiences shaping her into a compassionate leader. She started a school club that organized food drives and fundraisers for local shelters, continuing the legacy of kindness that had once saved John. One evening, as the three of them sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Mia leaned against John's shoulder. "Mr. John," she asked, "do you think everything happens for a reason?" John smiled thoughtfully. "I used to wonder that a lot," he said, "but now I think it's less about why things happen and more about what we do with what happens to us." Angela nodded, holding Mia's hand. "And sometimes the smallest things like sharing a sandwich can change someone's life in ways we never expect." Mia grinned. "Then I'm glad I gave you my sandwich, Mr. John." John chuckled, his eyes misty with gratitude. "So am I, Mia. So am I." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the three of them sat together, bound by a story of hardship, bravery, and the enduring power of kindness. If this story inspired you, remember that even the smallest act of kindness can make a difference. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. And be sure to check out our next video, because you never know how one moment can change a life forever.